On this episode of Mitch and Mark at the Movies, we're going to be talking about the new Bob Dylan biopic that is in theaters right now called A Complete Unknown. And we're going to go in depth about Bob Dylan and that time period in his life. Mitch has a lot to say about it. We hope you enjoy it. Let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Mitch and Mark at the Movies. My name is Mark Fisher, and I'm here with Mitch Brisker. How are you doing today, Mitch?
Hey, I'm doing great, Mark. Great to see you again. Thanks for dropping by, guys. Just a little message to my followers. As you can see, I'm back in the blanket for it. I'm back recording my audiobook, and maybe on New Year's Day, or I'll be doing some streaming first. You know, as the most recent high-level defector from the international base, I still have a lot to unpack. So I'm hoping you'll join me for some of that. But today we're here to talk about movies.
Yeah, and we want to thank everybody who watched our first episode where we went. You went over the film Wicked, which is in theaters right now, and we appreciate the comments from people and the suggestions. And we'll be doing you'll be doing some live shows in the future. We're just trying to get our feet wet and try and get going here. But we've got a great. This show is showing out on my channel, Las Vegas Travel and More, Mitch's channel, Scientology: The Big Lie, and please subscribe, hit that notification button so you know when new episodes come up, and of course hit the like button if you like that.
Yeah, and don't forget to support our channels because it really helps us to keep these things going. So on my channel, there's a link tree. There's all kinds of creative ways that you can throw money at me or at the channel rather. So
buy us a coffee.
Yeah, you can take yourself for coffee. And if you're in LA, hit me up and I'll buy you a coffee. Okay. Like there for real. Go.
Yeah, no. So I wanted to say we're going to be talking about a movie today that you mentioned last week. It's award season, so it's going to be up for many awards. And why don't you tell everybody what the name of the movie is, and we'll talk about it.
Oh, A Complete Unknown, the Bob Dylan biopic. Directed by James Mangold, who was a fellow alumni of CalArts, so I can't really speak negatively about it. But I have some problems with the film. Do you want to just dive right in?
Well, let me just give a little background. James Mangold has directed Girl Interrupted in '99 that Angelina Jolie won an Oscar for, and then he did Walk the Line, the Johnny Cash biopic, and then more recently he's done the Wolverine, a couple of Wolverine movies. But he directs this one, A Complete Unknown, and it stars Timothy Chalamet as Bob Dylan there, and you can see Elle Fanning. I think that's her name, right?
Yeah, her name is Elle Fanning.
By
the way, fun fact. She dated my younger son in middle school. So there you go.
Oh, fabulous. But anyway, she plays his girlfriend at the time. This movie takes place in the early 1960s when he's 20 years old and comes to New York City and goes into the folk music scene there. So why don't you go ahead and now you can get into it. I just wanted to tell people what.
Okay, great. Well, let's not also forget James Mangold directed Tom Cruise in The Last Samurai.
Oh, okay.
I have a lot to say about that film, not because of Scientology and Tom Cruise or whatever, but because of my love of Japanese cinema and Japanese culture. And we're going to be doing a stream about The Last Samurai and Japanese cinema at some point coming up in the future. So, okay, A Complete Unknown. The title is obviously from one of Bob Dylan's, the lyrics, titles of one of his songs, or a lyric from one of his songs. This film is extremely entertaining and deeply flawed. And so, it plays really loose with history and more symbolically than in terms of facts. When filmmakers do this, they sort of have this get out of jail free card where they say, well, hey, I wasn't making a documentary. Fair enough. I heard James Mangold say that about this film when it received some criticism about how it portrayed some of the circumstances. The other one is, hey, but Bob Dylan was involved. He read through the whole script and made suggestions, etc. But interesting on that subject. Can you bring up the quote? I'd like to share that. So Dylan, I read in a review that Dylan went to X and had nothing but praise for Timothy Chalamet. But let's take a look at the actual tweet. So Bob Dylan says on X, he says, "There's a movie about me opening soon called A Complete Unknown." What a title. I'm sorry, this sounds like a publicist. This does not sound like Bob Dylan. Timothy Chalamet is starring in the lead role. Timothy is a brilliant actor, so I'm sure he's going to be completely believable as me. Or now I want you to pay particular attention to this. He says he's a brilliant actor, so I'm sure he's going to be completely believable as me or a younger me or some other me. The film's taken from Elijah Wald's Dylan Goes Electric, a book that came out in 2015. It's a fantastic retelling of events from the early 60s that led up to the fiasco at Newport. After you've seen the movie, read the book. Well, yeah, I mean, we'll talk about the fiasco at Newport later. So, but what's interesting here is that Dylan, like, he's being Bob Dylan. He's being vague. He's being sort of mythical. He's being kind of like, am I from Minnesota? Yeah, but maybe I'm from New Mexico or Minnesota, or my name's not Dylan. That's just because I love Dylan Thomas. My name's Zimmerman, and we don't know anything about his family. And so he always managed to maintain this kind of mystique about himself. So I think all he cares about, is that they do a good story of the events. It doesn't need to be accurate. It just needs to kind of reflect the spirit of the times. And before we actually get into the film, I want to bring up an earlier Bob Dylan biopic called "I'm Not There" by Todd Haynes. Highly recommend it. If you haven't seen this film, I recommend you watch it before you watch A Complete Unknown. In this film, Bob Dylan, like, he seemed to have all these different personas. Maybe he rode the rails like Woody Guthrie. Maybe he was a civil rights activist. Maybe he was a socialist or a communist or a cult leader who was going to lead young people into a new direction. He had all these different personas. So what Todd Haynes did was he cast 6 people, including Cate Blanchett and a brilliant young black kid who maybe 12 years old, who played him. Christian Bale plays him. Heath Ledger plays him. So there's all these different people play Bob Dylan in his different personas. And so the whole reason why I brought this up is to, one, give a plug for Todd Haynes' film, because a lot of people are saying, the best biopic on Dylan is I'm Not There. But the reason that I'm bringing it up is that I wanted to make the point about the different personas of Bob Dylan, because with this Timothy Chalamet version, we have the teen idol version. We have the Dylan with adoring fans that are chasing him down the street like he's like a member of the Beatles or something like that. So, there you go. Yeah, we have the baby face. I mean, Dylan was kind of baby face, but he wasn't as cute as
Timothy Chalamet. No, he's not. Yeah.
When I became aware of this film, I heard, it's starring Timothy Chalamet and it's opening on Christmas Day. This is going to be a teen idol film. This is not going to be like a Todd Haynes film. This is going to be a James Mangold film, where we sort of, I'll give you an example. The emotional core of this film is based around a love triangle between Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, and his first muse, whose name was, they changed the name for the film. Let me, I've got it here somewhere. So
it's Sylvia Russo, something.
Yeah, it's Susie Russo. That was her name. She was an artist, a very interesting person. She was a daughter of Italian immigrants who happened to be communists. She grew up in, I think, Brooklyn or the Bronx. Sorry, I can't remember. She was an artist. She's on the cover of The Free Will and Bob Dylan, if you have that album handy. He's walking on the cover with a girl. That's Susie Russo. He asked James Mangold to not use her real name. He wasn't trying to hide her identity. Everybody knows who it was. He just didn't want her name used. So she went by, they changed it to Monica. Oh, no, that's the other two. What the hell did they change it to?
Sylvia was the name of the girl.
Yeah. Sylvie Russo.
Yeah, and Elle Fanning plays her, and that's her behind, Timothy Chalamet right there playing Sylvia.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, she was the one that kind of politicized Dylan and got him interested in civil rights and workers' rights. And, we thought I always thought he sort of showed up on the scene in the guise of Woody Guthrie, meaning he was already politically part of the left, and he was a troubadour for the common man. He was supporting unions and all that stuff. But he really wasn't. He was just kind of in love with the mystique of Woody Guthrie. At least that's how I took away from the film. And it was really, then I read about it later, and it was really Sylvie Russo who kind of energized him to be political, which is probably he never would have written The Times They Are Changing, which became literally the anthem of the counterculture for my generation. If it hadn't been for his relationship. Now, there's some very heavy-handed dialogue in this film. There's a scene where he's trying to get a date with the Sylvie Russo character. And she says, well, I think it was Thursdays. On Thursdays, I volunteer to work with CORE. And Dylan says, what's that? And Mitch Brisker cringes in his seat and is like, you didn't just ask the lead of the movie to explain something just so the audience will understand it. It's just, I couldn't believe it. Like, who cares if we know what CORE was or not? He says, what was that? And she says, oh, Congress of Racial Equality, which was a big deal back then. I think I was a member of CORE when I was in college. But she could have just said, yeah, I volunteer for the Congress of Racial Equality or whatever. But there's some little, like, these kind of bad writing, expository hiccups. Well, I think my favorite one in the whole film is when Dylan's upset about the pushback from his fans, and he says, they only want me to sing Blowing in the Wind for the rest of my life. And I'm just like going, no, you didn't say that. Because that's what the whole movie's about. Right. So, like, just trust your movie, James. Let it happen. You don't have to tell the audience in one line from the lead character what it's about, like as if they're not going to get it. So I was a little, excuse me for being so academic about it, but I was a little miffed by that kind of thing. So, but I think the choice, so the film really centers on two things, two stories. In my view, a good film has three stories. This one only has two. And the two stories are the love triangle between, Joan Baez, Sylvie Russo, which is really Sylvie Russo is really Sylvie Russo, and the other story is the problem that Dylan creates at the Newport Folk Festival for just being an asshole. I mean, let's just put it out there, right? We'll talk about that.
This is Joan Baez and in that time period. She's of course
another
famous
problem
folk singer.
Another problem I had with the film is that they really sexed her up. I mean, I thought that.
Oh yeah.
I thought that. What's her name? Monica Barbaro, who was in Top Gun. She played a fighter pilot in Top Gun.
Yeah.
She's a really good actor. She did an amazing job. She spent a year.
I looked her up afterwards because I recognized her right away, but didn't know who she was. So I looked her up after the movie.
Well, she's a star now. I mean, she spent a year learning guitar and learning to sing, and she was amazing. I mean, truly amazing. But, Joan Baez wasn't that sexy. She was like an Earth Mother. I mean, I saw her in person a few times, close up. I saw her in, I think, 1969 at the Big Sur Folk Festival with Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and a bunch of other people. But anyway, so that was a little for me, a little problematic that they made her so sexy. She was really like Dylan's big sister. She was the queen of the folk movement back then, like the reigning queen. She still is one of the greatest acoustic vocalists to ever perform. And she met Bob Dylan, and she really liked him, and she was in love with his talent. And she recorded some of his songs, and she broke him onto the scene. I mean, she really made him, and he screwed her over, which you see in the film. And this is another problem I have with the film. The way he screws her over and the whole stunt he pulls at Newport, they toss it off as a kind of a quirk, right? But it wasn't. I mean, this was a deeply flawed individual, and like his whatever it was. Personally, I'm going to get some flack for this. I think Bob Dylan might have been autistic, which is not a criticism at all, but it kind of helps to frame some of his behavior, because I think maybe I was watching the film and I'm thinking, I've always thought Dylan was very awkward, extremely awkward, and had difficulty assessing social cues.
Mm-hmm.
And he had this genius way of looking at the world differently from everybody else. And I have autistic friends that are like that. They're artistic geniuses. They're, they might screw you over, but they're not really screwing you over. You just need to talk to them because they're just seeing things differently. And I started to wonder if the whole quote unquote fiasco at Newport wasn't just Bob not understanding what he owed those people that he had betrayed at that concert. So that's kind of my overall assessment. Is
well,
that
I was gonna
is,
let me
sure,
kick in just right. There's portrayed in the movie is Pete Seeger, who also was like the father of folk music in America, at least, and he's played fantastically by Edward Norton. What a performance!
Yeah, he's going to get an Oscar nomination, minimally.
Yeah, to me, he steals the film. I mean, he's so good. And the message I got, because see, I'm not, I'm a little younger, and Bob Dylan, I was like 3 years old when this, time period happened. But I found it interesting because I didn't know much about Bob Dylan. I'd never really been a big fan, except that I know his songs, his music, of course, right? But I thought they did a great job of creating the atmosphere of New York, Greenwich Village, Soho, bohemian culture in the 1960s with their sets and their locations and that type of thing. I thought that was really good. I thought the music was really good. They used Bob Dylan's music really well. And I understand that Timothy Chalamet, he sang the songs, which is not hard to do. It's not hard to do because Dylan has a distinctive voice that
I beg your pardon. I'm
just saying he can be easily copied or imitated.
I don't think so. I think he can be imitated,
so?
But no, I think you can.
No, I meant imitated. He's not as good as
he
Dylan,
didn't imitate him though, Mark. He didn't imitate him.
You didn't think so?
He
thought
did
a little bit.
He did a
really
no. He did a really pure rendition. I mean, I think
I thought it was excellent. The music was great.
Yeah,
I mean, his singing, if that was him, he was really good. So
yeah,
that.
Like a Rolling Stone is, the Rolling Stone magazine's 500 greatest hits of all time, greatest songs of all time. The number one is Like a Rolling Stone. So,
yeah,
but I also think his possible being on the spectrum may explain why he didn't show up for a Pulitzer Prize, because he didn't know how to. People were, they thought he did it like Brando did it when he didn't show up for an Academy Award, which was he sent in his Native American girlfriend. It was a total protest. And so people, in their neurotypical mindset thought, oh, well, it's a protest. But I don't know that it just wasn't, he's too awkward to show up. And
well, which is really kind of, it's wild because he has no problem when he's on stage performing, but then behind the scenes, he doesn't want to be out in the public. He's really more of a introvert or shy person, it seems like, towards the public, but he doesn't mind getting up there and singing and playing his guitar and performing with the band,
Yeah. Yesterday I watched the 60 Minutes interview with Dylan. Oh God, it was like, I don't know, 10 years ago or something. He mumbles his way through it. I mean, everything about that interview confirms my suspicion that Dylan is kind of on the spectrum, and but whatever. Like I said, that's not a criticism, because I have, I'm currently doing a project with my co-writer, creator is very high functioning, neurodivergent person. So I'm kind of, I have a lot of connections to that community. But I want to go back to address something you said. You said you were 3 years old. Now, we've all heard the saying, music provides the soundtrack for our lives, right? And I was thinking about this, and there's probably no artist, maybe the Beatles would be the other exception, who provided such a rich, meaningful soundtrack to my life than Bob Dylan. And I want to just kind of unpack that a little bit, because not to talk about myself, but I think it will help really reinforce the things that were good about the film and things that were wrong. Okay, so I grew up in a very left-wing progressive family. My parents were either communist adjacent or they were members of the American Communist Party. If you want to understand what that meant, go watch the film Trumbo, about blacklisted writer Dalton Trumbo. My parents were kind of not Hollywood people. They were in architecture, but they were associated with a lot of those people. They were friends with Michael Wilson, who was blacklisted, who wrote Lawrence of Arabia. So I grew up in this household, and we had Pete Seeger records. Pete Seeger was a communist of that ilk. We had, when I was a young child, I was introduced to Pete Seeger, Cisco Houston, Ramon Jack Elliott, Woody Guthrie, Ledbetter, and, all these musicians that were associated with socialism and the left wing, because after World War II, there was a massive move towards creating a more peaceful world. And so, because at that time, prior to World War II, the only people fighting fighting fascism were the communists in Spain. So they were kind of the good guys back then. And that all changed. And I don't want to get into the whole politics of it, but
right.
All of my parents and their friends and whatever, they talked about those days as they were in the past. And, they all quit being members of the Communist Party. We can talk about that more later, because it's really a fascinating time, and I know an awful lot about it. So I was raised in this kind of household with all this music. I started playing cello when I was 10 years old. Interestingly enough, I took cello lessons at the LA Conservatory of Music, which later became the Whiskey A Go-Go. And the LA Conservatory of Music was absorbed into Cal Arts, where I ended up going to college. But then when I was 13, I told my mother, I don't want to play the cello anymore. I want to play the banjo, because I'd been listening to these Pete Seeger records. So I started playing the banjo, and I started playing folk music with a friend of mine who went on to, you might have heard of the band Little Feat. He was the lead in Little Feat. We had a band for a while. So we kind of went through my point is, I think everybody was going through this transition back then, this transition from acoustic music to electric music. So when I was 15, so here was a big deal. So we saw how Pete Seeger was presented in the film as this sort of pure, folky, leftist man of the people, which he was. He was all of those things. A kind of awkward music teacher, which he also was. Remember, Mark, the TV show they showed?
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to watch that show when I was a kid. Oh, yeah. I used to play banjo literally along with Pete Seeger records. So there was this other little band in LA called the Byrds, right? Everybody's heard of the Byrds, right? And they were all a bunch of folkies who picked up electric guitars. But, they were really, the Byrds were really the band that created folk rock. And just keep that up there. I'm going to tell the story about that photo. So, what's his name? Roger McGuinn, who, not Roger McGuinn. Who was it? It was, not Roger McGuinn was the lead singer. I've spaced out on the name.
David Crosby was in there.
Yeah, no,
Roger
but I'm
McGuinn.
not. I know, yeah, but I'm not. And Gene Clark, and what's the other?
Roger, wasn't there McGuire? Somebody named McGuire?
No, McGuinn. The guy on the far right is Roger McGuinn. The guy on the far left is David Crosby. The guy on the drums is somebody, and the guy singing next to Dylan is Gene Clark. But anyway, I can't remember the other guy. But there was a guy. He was a bluegrass musician from San Diego. He moved to LA. He needed a cheap place to live. He was the first musician.
Was it Richie Furay?
No, Richie Furay was never in the Byrds. He was in Poco.
Right. I'm just throwing names out. How about Jim Messina?
No, Jim Messina was never in the Byrds. Here, hold on. I'm just going to look it up. This is a little too painful. I don't know.
I know I'm throwing these names out too, only because they all.
Yeah, and I know who they all are. I mean,
they
some
were
of those,
Buffalo Springfield, because a lot of times people mix up Buffalo.
Yeah, I mean, some of those people I knew. Chris Hillman. So sorry, people.
Chris Hillman. Okay, yeah.
Okay, so Chris Hillman moves to Laurel Canyon. He's the first one, and so then they do this album called Mr. Tambourine Man. It's their first album, right? And it has this Dylan song, and we all know it's a Dylan song. And people are wondering, like, what does Bob Dylan think about this? Because that song goes to #1 on the US 100 Billboard chart, album top 100 albums, and in Britain.
He wrote that song. He wrote that song, Mr. Tambourine Man.
Yeah,
right?
Dylan wrote it, and he hadn't released it. He had maybe released it or was about to release it. And a lot of people had done his music. Like the Byrds did that song. Joan Baez did a bunch of songs of his. But here's the deal. They did another song, which was a folk song called Turn, Turn, Turn. For every season, turn, turn. Okay. That song was written by Pete Seeger. Like a lot of people don't know that. So there are these connections with that musical period. So then the Byrds, it also goes to number one. So now the Byrds have two number one hits. They have a Dylan hit and they have a Pete Seeger hit. And nobody's bitching and moaning about the Byrds doing electrified folk music because they liked the songs and they did it really respectfully, right? So here's something they didn't show in the movie. And I know it's not a documentary, with all due respect to James Mangold, but this is even according to Dylan's own accounting. He saw the Byrds rehearsing for a recording session, and they were rehearsing Mr. Tambourine Man. That was the major influence that got him to pick up an electric guitar, because hearing the Byrds play his song Electrified gave him the idea of the potential for playing that kind of music. So the big question in everybody's mind was, what did Bob Dylan think about this, upstart new band having these two massive hits? Nobody knows who David Crosby is yet. These are they're a local LA band. I mean, we're all going to see them, and I'm sneaking into clubs to see them. So, but none of us know, because Dylan's released. I'm trying to think of which album it was that maybe it was his album with Mr. Tambourine Man, because I know I'd heard that, and I'd heard the Byrds on the radio. I'd heard the Dylan version on a record because it wasn't being played on the radio. It wasn't a hit. And so we were all kind of wondering, and they said, and then on Dylan's album, he had one song, Subterranean Homesick Blues, it made it to 38. So that's a significant difference. I mean, you have the Byrds having a number one hit with this song, and then you having him not even getting above 38 on the top 100 albums on a song from on the top on that list. So one night, so we all wonder, what the hell does Bob Dylan think about this? So one night, I was 15 years old, I was living with my parents, and I very illegally rolled my motor. I had a motorcycle. Don't even ask me how, but I was 15. I had a motorcycle, and I had a learner's permit. I wasn't allowed to ride it at night. Rolled it out of the garage, rolled it down the hill, popped the clutch, headed to the Sunset Strip to a club called Ciro's, which is today the Comedy Store, because the Byrds were playing there, and there was a rumor that Bob Dylan was in town and maybe was going to show up. And we used to see these things all the time. I mean, I went to a party and watched the Yardbirds, and it was like a local scene. The LA music scene was really vibrant, and you could often catch some things that later you'd think, oh my God, I was actually there, and stood 4 feet from Jeff Beck for an evening watching him play. It was pretty crazy. So anyway, I drove my motorcycle down to Ciro's. I parked the bike in the parking lot on the back. I snuck in through the kitchen, and I stood in the back of the club watching the Byrds. And then somewhere in their set, they brought out Dylan, and Dylan did Mr. Tambourine Man. You can put and so I was there, and I saw this, and that kind of answered the question for all of us, that this was a kind of a unified front. Dylan was totally okay with them having a hit. They were, after all, the ones who inspired him to go electric. Nobody was booing him there. Nobody was bitching and moaning. And I think he really owes two people, Joan Baez for launching his career, and the Byrds for steering it in a new direction, because they're really the ones who did that. And of course, what he did with that direction was uniquely Bob Dylan, and it made him one of the greatest acts of all time and one of the greatest songwriters of all time. So nothing against that. And then, so when I say, the soundtrack for, of my life, at least at that period, that was a pretty big force. I mean, I bought his first album when I was 12. I learned all the songs. So, and it was because the music, I didn't idolize Dylan, but I really idolized that music.
Right. I'm like I said, I was born in 1958. So I remember watching the Beatles on Ed Sullivan in 64. And we were just, when we were really young, we listened to pop music, the Archies and the Monkees and all that. Right. But for me, in my teenage years, like from that type of folky type of, folk rock genre, for me, it was Joni Mitchell and Gordon Lightfoot. And then later in high school, Jackson Browne and Dan Fogelberg. Those were the ones that spoke to me that I really enjoyed and liked. So Dylan was before that for me. So it's just funny how, music, to me, music has an emotional connection to people. Like you said, it reminds you of different times.
Well, like nothing else. Like nothing else.
If I hear a song, it'll put me back into the time period.
It's the role of music in a film is to regulate your emotional state.
And the thing is, it's interesting to me is that, watching this movie about Bob Dylan, I didn't realize the lyrics, you know what I mean? Like, it seemed like the characters, or the Pete Seeger and Joan Baez and all that, they were not only impressed by his musical ability, but also his lyrics. To them, they really spoke to them, as people, because he's such a deep he's 20 years old, he's writing this stuff. Well, it was the same for me with Joni Mitchell and all that. I mean, it's like, but here's the thing, when I was in high school and I was listening to this stuff, I didn't care what the lyrics was. It was the music that talked to me first. You know what I mean? Like people, this is a funny thing. Like, people always go like, oh yeah, I love that Jimi Hendrix song. What is that? Excuse me while I kiss that guy? No, it's excuse me while I kiss the sky, right? But people don't pay attention to the lyrics. They don't actually take the time to read them necessarily. So it is very emotional experience to listen to it. I really enjoyed in this movie the music and the time period and the connection. What I didn't like was his basically dissing Pete Seeger, who helped get him started. And I don't know what the relationship was like after the film, or after that time period in the film. But that was one thing that I went, I thought that he was being kind of an asshole. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And of course, again, there's some heavy, like referring back to some of the heavy-handed dialogue in the film. Joan Baez even does say, you can be a real asshole. I mean, that is one of her lines. So it's like, again, it's like, oh yeah, we were never going to get it. Thank you for telling us. Anyway, that stuff.
Well, what do you get? Let me ask you a couple questions. Let me ask you some specifics about the film. How did you like the cinematography, the set product, what do you call it?
Well, no, I mean, James Mangold, he's a
production value. Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. Production value that's most people.
No. I meant. I'm trying to think of the words, the set designs and all that. I mean, how did you like all that?
Production design.
Yeah, production design.
Yeah, production. Just to clarify for your viewers, the term production value is oft a very misunderstood term. Basically, what it means is if you make a film for $50 million and it looks like $100 million film, that film has $50 million worth of production value. It's the difference between what you spend and what it looks like. I've heard people say, oh my God, the production value in Avatar, it doesn't have any. It cost $1 billion. It looks like $1 billion. There's zero production value. But anyway, I thought the production design was spectacular. I didn't think it was any better than the Dylan inspired, who was, Llewellyn Davis, the Coen brothers film. Yeah, it was pretty much in there. And it was really good. The performance, I mean, this is why I said at the beginning of the stream, it's an immensely entertaining film that's deeply flawed. There's nothing wrong with the technical stuff whatsoever. I thought Scoot McNairy did a great job of playing the very ill Woody Guthrie. I thought he did. I mean, I guess it was a little.
And you liked Edward Norton's performance too, and some of the others, right?
Edward Norton's going to get an Oscar for that. He was amazing, and I was really thrilled that they treated Pete Seeger as good as they did, because he didn't seem like the villain that everybody's always painted him out to at the Newport Folk Festival. He was right. The urban legend goes like this: it was Pete Seeger who had a rectal prolapse because of what the hell Dylan was doing. And there's even a story, like it's like an urban myth, that Pete Seeger picked up a fire axe and chopped the electrical feed to the show, to the stage, which is BS. It never happened. But I have to say that there's James Mangold, in all of his infinite commercial wisdom.
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah. There's a shot in the film where Pete Seeger, he's not the bad guy. It's the board of directors who are the bad guys. Pete Seeger's
almost like a moderator, almost like trying to negotiate, trying to be the guy in between.
He realizes he can't negotiate. They got to shut the power off. And so he's looking around and he spots a table, and leaning against the table, there's no less than 10 fire axes.
Yeah, I saw that too.
And that, in case you didn't know, Mark, that's a tip of the hat to this urban myth.
No, I didn't know that, but it's funny that you mentioned that.
It's a little Easter egg for old boomers like me who know the whole freaking story and grew up playing Bob Dylan songs and blah, blah, blah. But I thought that was really historic. And then somebody grabs him and distracts him. And of course, they're kind of showing, oh, look, it never happened, but it almost did. It was weird. But I was really happy that they treated Pete Seeger as well as he did. He was quite a character.
Well, let me ask you, do you have anything else you wanted to say about it? Do you recommend the film? Like, people, should they go see it?
Well, I said the film is immensely entertaining. You're like, the thing is, and you can go, if you're older, if you're my age and you have kids that are like, I don't know, if theoretically you could have 3 generations of a family go and watch this film and they would all love it. The old boomer dudes like me would be like laughing and clapping and having fun because most of them wouldn't know it as intimately as I happen to. And maybe younger people are going to rediscover it, or maybe they already have. I mean, I got to tell you that when my younger son was in middle school, he had a girlfriend. They were at my house and she wanted to play some music and she was going through my film library. She picked Lou Reed, Neil Young, and somebody else. I don't remember. And I was like, holy moly, you're listening to the same music in high school that I was. Like, I was really blown away. These kids, they're not Taylor. There's a lot of kids out there. They're not Taylor Swift kids. They're like really listening to that music because during that period of time when I was growing up, a teenager and so forth, that music still today is probably the most influential music of all times.
Yeah.
So anything else I want to say about it? I don't know. Let me look at my notes. Get to that. Could you bring up? I think I sent you the cast list from.
I didn't get it.
God, I don't have it here. I thought I had it. Yeah. The people that played Bob Dylan in I'm Not There.
I have that on the movie poster.
Yeah, does it say? Let's just read it out because I'm going to tell you.
I know it says Christian Bale,
Kate Blanchett, Marcus Carl Franklin. He's a young black kid who's an amazing actor.
Mm-hmm.
Richard Gere, Heath Ledger, and Ben Whishaw. Are you not curious about how all these people portray Dylan in one film? So this is a two.
Well, I'm curious. I'm curious to see this movie because I never saw it when it came out. I remember it was up for a lot of awards, but I was just
it's like a high art film.
It's called "I'm Not There" for the viewers.
Yeah, it's called "I'm Not There." "I'm Not There," by the way, is the title of an obscure Dylan bootleg tape song that was discovered and. No, I think we now have added to all of the different personas that Bob Dylan has been responsible for, many of which he created himself. We now have the teen throb version. Yeah. So, that's pretty much what I have to say about this film. So,
okay, great.
But I definitely recommend it along with.
I recommend it too. Now, for me, I was going to say this was the first movie that I've seen in the theater in 5 years because that's where it's playing. It came out on Christmas Day, and I have to just briefly say my movie experience, stopped right before COVID. Okay, so then we were closed for COVID, and then I just got used to watching movies at home. So you pay your money for the ticket, you pay the $6 for a soda, and you sit down and you watch. So it's for some people, if you want to see it on big screen experience, it's fantastic. And I had a comfortable reclining seat and the whole bit and all that. But if you want to wait and watch it when it comes on streaming, that's okay.
Yeah,
too. I think it's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just lazy as hell. I get a lot of. I usually watch screeners or I go to like the Directors Guild and walk in and I think, oh damn, the floor's not sticky. But hey, I don't have to sit through 20 minutes of trailers. But I went to see.
Oh, that's the other thing too. 25 minutes of advertisements before you even get to the movie.
It's crazy. And you want to know what? A lawyer once sued them for breach of contract. because he got so pissed off because on your ticket it says a start time, but that's not the start time. It's the start time is 25 minutes later. So, and that ticket is a contract. So maybe we should all do a class action lawsuit. But I went to a theater to see it, and I really enjoyed it. I did
too.
I mean, being in a theater, it was a good theatrical experience. Maybe
and for me, I last movie I saw before this one in the theater was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino, big screen. I knew I need that big screen experience.
But he shot it. When a filmmaker goes through the trouble of shooting a film on 65 millimeter, you should go see it in the theater. Which is, I think the last film I'd seen was that abysmal, horrible film. What was it called? The one about the A-bomb guy. I just can't think of it. God damn it.
Oppenheimer.
Yeah, if there was an Academy Award for the most filmmaking, they would give it to that one. We could talk about that. I thought.
Don't get me started on that movie. I hate that kind of construction of a movie where like you're trying to figure, rather than going sequentially through, they're jumping all around. And
I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with that.
I know. I don't. On some when it's well done, I don't mind it. But this one was so confusing. I had no idea who Robert Downey's character was in the movie until the end. I mean, it made no sense. Yeah, for some reason, he really made it very subtle that there were these hearings going on into who leaked the secrets to the communists. Yeah, it was really bizarre. My biggest problem was it felt like an art film for the first 20 minutes. It was really cool. And then Matt Damon showed up and he started doing one-liners and cracking wires, and all of a sudden it became like Hollywood film. And I was just like, what? Anyway, I thought it was incredibly self-indulgent. Well, I want to talk briefly about one more film that you recommended on the last show that I watched. I went ahead and did the pay-per-view on, Netflix or whatever, or I think it was Amazon Prime, Saturday night, about the TV show Saturday Night Live. And it's about getting the first episode on the air. And I really enjoyed the movie. Now, I'm a Saturday Night Live. That's my time period and all that. Now, I think some people, in my opinion, it's really well done. I mean, the casting, the acting, everything's great about it. It's like mass confusion at all times, but that's the message they were trying. That was what was going on. They were trying to show that at the same time. And
it's a very chaotic film.
Yeah, very chaotic. And they duplicated the set. I listened to some podcasts by people who worked on Saturday Night Live. Said they duplicated it exactly. So you really feel like you're there. To me, though, it was just sort of like, I don't know if it's going to catch an audience, like a younger audience who doesn't really relate to that. I think it's more for
I think it will. I think one of the brilliance of this film is that if you never heard of Saturday Night Live, you didn't know who these actors were, the whole thing just still works. Like, it's not like there's so many references to the original show that if you don't get the references, you won't enjoy the show. Yes, there's a lot of references, and if you get them, that's great. But the enjoyment of the film isn't dependent on that. I mean, I heard this film referred to by one reviewer as the feel-good film of the entire year, and I would, at least from what I've seen, I would have to agree, because it was really, And the other thing is, it chronicles. And here's a case where a filmmaker tells you through a character what his film's about, but it works. Whereas in Complete Unknown, it's kind of corny. There's a line in there where somebody says, this is the first show made by and for people who grew up watching television. And I never really thought about that, but I would just graduated from college when it premiered. So that would have been 1975, 6, something like that. Anyway.
No, I recommend it. I definitely recommend it. I enjoyed it. That's all. That was my only.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a must-see film. It's really amazing. I should also say one more thing about Dylan that I meant to say. So I thought the whole thing about the Byrds and them really steering influencing his career to go electrified. The way they showed it, they sort of put Dylan in a vacuum, and he's in his apartment, and he's on the phone to like some record executive. He goes, "I need a guitar player and a drummer. Get it done." Like he's some mogul or something. But that's not how it happened. There was so much going on, like the Byrds and other things to influence him. But the two guys that he found, Al Cooper and Mike Bloomfield, especially Al Cooper, I really hope a younger generation discovers these guys. You know, Al Cooper was in Blood, Sweat, and Tears. He was in the Blues Project. He was in the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. He discovered Leonard Skinner. He played with them. He produced most of their records. And yeah, he's 80 years old and he's a legend and he's still doing stuff. So I'm hoping they do that. I know so that summer when I saw Dylan at Ciro's play with the Byrds, and right before that, we'd had in March, I think it was, we'd had the fiasco at Newport. And then I think it was around July, Dylan was touring. This is why he was in LA in 65. He was going to do a show at the Hollywood Bowl with the Paul Butterfield Blues Band that Al Cooper and Mike Bloomfield were also in. And I was fortunate enough to have gotten tickets to see that show. Dylan did an acoustic set. That was his thing. Then he brought, and Paul Butterfield Blues Band opened up, and one of the greatest blues bands ever. And so then Dylan did his acoustic set, and then the band came out and they played with him, right? But while he was doing his acoustic set, his harmonica was out of tune, and he said, "Has anybody got a C harmonica?" The sky turned black with harmonicas. It rained harmonicas. The audience threw hundreds of Dylan had to duck for cover. Like, how much do your fans love you when they all show up with your harmonica in their pocket? Yeah. It was really, and nobody was booing him then, boy. They were just thrilled with the whole deal. But anyway, that's I wanted to tell that anecdote because it was
that's amazing. Great. And I just wanted to mention Bob Dylan is still alive. He's 83 years old. Joan Baez is still alive. She's 83 years old.
Yeah.
Susan,
she died in 2011.
She died. Yeah. So she died in 2011. But their main characters. Pete Seeger died about in 2017, a little while ago, 2014.
Hey, here's a fun. Fun fact. I know we don't do Scientology on this channel, but you know me. It's like I'm like a cheap slut at the prom. I'll talk to anybody about Scientology. Anyway, no. So Pete Seeger was famous for playing a Vega banjo, which is a legendary brand of folk banjos, not bluegrass banjos. There's a very differently. They're both 5-string. One has a resonator, blah, blah, blah. And he played a what's called a long neck, 24 frets, as opposed to the standard 22 fret banjo. And so, the Deerings, who are Scientologists, who make Deering banjos. I have one of their banjos. They make some of the finest banjos in the world. They bought Vega, right? It was falling into kind of bankruptcy. And so they rescued the mark, and with it they got Pete Seeger. So in the final days of his life, he was endorsing Vega banjos, which was owned by Scientologists. So,
oh wow,
such a small world.
Fact. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, people forget there's a lot of really good people in Scientology. These people are victims. They're brainwashed.
Oh, yeah.
They don't know what the hell they're doing, but it doesn't make them inherently bad people. Sometimes gets overlooked in all the noise.
Well, that's like Bill Church's Fried Chicken, which their franchise.
Oh, yeah, he was. That's right. He was a Scientologist. Yeah. And Taylor Guitars. There's another one.
And
one of the
Coleman.
Coleman, I knew him, Bobby. Yeah, but they haven't owned that in a long time. I think
Cooper
they sold
Rounds
that.
and Bobby Rounds. And his mother.
I knew Bobby.
Cooper
I knew Bobby.
Was the one that Janice had to crush on when she was a teenager.
Yeah, I knew Bobby because I was really good. The people don't know what they're talking about. Bobby Rounds was a Scientologist who was the heir to the Coleman, camping gear fortune. He was married to, what's her name, Susie Coelho. Yeah, and she used
to be a girlfriend of Sonny Bono, right?
No, they were married.
They were married. Okay.
Yeah, they were married. She brought Sonny Bono into Celebrity Center. We used to see him there all the time. And then he passed away. And then I think she was married to Bobby. Yeah, Susie and I were good friends. We were as close as you could get without dating. I really liked her a lot. I hope she got out of Scientology.
Well, let's wrap it up here. We're gonna ask everybody, please subscribe to our channel, Las Vegas Travel and More, and also Scientology: The Big Lie. And also, I wanted to mention, Mitch has a book, Scientology: The Big Lie. Mitch Brisker. You can order it on Amazon and at your website, right?
Yeah, you can. I know it sounds a little pricey, but there's a really beautiful edition of the book, which you can order from Barnes & Noble, or you can order from me. You know, it has a printed hard jacket and it has a dust jacket. And you can't get that from Amazon, but you can get it from me or Barnes & Noble. But if you get it from me, it's $60. It's a little pricey, but I will sign it and I'll put anything you want in there. And it helps keep the channel going. So I appreciate that.
And so they can go to your merchandise site at your YouTube channel or at your
or MitchBrisker.com. They could go there. There's a bunch of shameless promotion and merch on there. And I wanted to
it's
say
an excellent book. I mean, I read it and I promote it. It's really, really good.
Thank you, Mark. But I also want to say that please leave your comments on either channel on what you think about this, both the fact that we're doing this and what we had to say about it. I hope
and suggestions.
Yeah, and if there's any movies you'd like us to cover, I mean, we're going to kind of focus on award season right now because that's what's happening. And if any film like the Todd Haynes I'm Not There is relevant, then we'll bring that up as well. But if you have suggestions for films you'd like us to cover, and specifically if you disagree and want to argue about any of the points we've made about this film, boy, we just
please
love
do. Bring it on. Bring it on.
Please,
we love it.
Because we'll just shit all over you. No, I'm just kidding. No, that would be great. It would be a lot of fun to have that interaction because I really like listening to people's opinions that differ from mine. Because sometimes there are things like, wow, I didn't think of that.
It's a good point. And then also you can buy me a coffee down in the description. That helps support the channel, helps us put out more of these videos on Mitch's channel. I'm sure he's got different things you can do to support it. It really, we're not begging for money. It just helps support the channel.
Oh no, I am. I'm begging for money, Mark. Yeah, I'm begging for money. Yeah, I can't do this without some support. So,
well, you know how they say it's exchange. You know what I mean? It's like
it's like it's like Dylan's song. How does it feel to be on your own, a complete unknown, just scrounging for your next meal? So,
like a Rolling Stone.
Oh yeah, that's right. A complete unknown's from Like a Rolling Stone. I forgot about that.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, until next time, Mitch, I've enjoyed this as usual, and we'll be coming to you again soon. But we want to wish everybody Happy New Year and happy holidays. And until next time, bye-bye.
Yeah, take care. Thanks, Mark.